I always thought betrayal would come with a knife to the back, not a smile across the table and a fresh cup of coffee. My name is Christina, and the morning I pretended to sip that poisoned brew, I began uncovering a deadly secret brewed by the two people I trusted most, my husband and my sister-in-law. The coffee cup in front of me sat motionless, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching me, judging me, daring me. It gave off a strange, metallic scent, one that clashed with the fragrant roasted beans Nina claimed were imported from some boutique roastery in Vermont. "Don't you want to try the coffee I made, especially for you, honey?" my husband, James, asked, smiling, but something about it didn't feel right. That smile didn't reach his eyes. I was seated at the elegant oak dining table in Nina's home, the polished centerpiece of her carefully curated life, in Nashville's elite Belle Meade neighborhood. Crystal chandeliers twinkled overhead like stars that didn't belong in the same sky as me. It was our usual monthly brunch with James's family, a tradition that had once made me feel like I was part of something warm and safe. Now it felt like a trap. "My name is Christina Bennett. I'm 29, a senior executive at Alden Marketing Group, and lately, a reluctant detective in my marriage." James's voice still hung in the air, as if daring me to sip. I lifted the mug and inhaled again. That smell. I'd smelled it before last month, actually, in Nina's kitchen, when I'd sipped her tea and spent the night in urgent care while she reassured everyone she'd made it the same way as always. "I'll try it in a minute," I said, forcing a smile. "Looks hot." Across from me, Nina absently stirred her untouched coffee, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the porcelain. "James has become quite the barista lately," she said, her smirk sharp as ever. "He's been trying different brewing methods just for you." The way she emphasized "for you" chilled me more than the blast of air from the vent. Behind me, Nina had always had a way of appearing gracious, the helpful sister-in-law, the doting hostess. But ever since James and I got married 3 years ago, her sweetness had felt laced with something bitter, something that left me humiliated, or mysteriously ill more often than coincidence could explain. My hands shook slightly as I pretended to check my phone. I needed to get away from the table to think, to breathe. "Oh, would you look at that?" I said, standing. "I need to make a quick call for work." Nina's eyes narrowed, though her lips kept their tight, glossy smile. "You can use the study. Try not to break anything." I nodded, stepping away, but as I passed Nina's place setting, I stumbled just slightly, enough to knock into the table, enough to confuse. "Oh, sorry," I exclaimed, catching the edge of the table to steady myself. In the moment of chaos, I switched our cups. Nina waved me off with a tight smile, and I slipped into the study, my heart hammering in my chest. Through the cracked door, I had a clear view of the dining table. And there it was. Nina lifted the cup that was meant for me, and sipped. My breath caught. My stomach twisted with guilt and dread. I didn't want her to get hurt. I just needed to know. James sat beside her, texting, unconcerned. The same man who'd once cried when I told him I had landed the Henderson pitch, the biggest client Alden Marketing had ever pursued. The same man who, more recently, had started spending far too much time at Nina's house planning my anniversary surprise. That surprise was starting to look a lot like my funeral. I watched Nina pause. Her hand trembled. "James," she said slowly, "something's wrong." His head jerked up. "What?" She tried to stand, but faltered, catching the edge of the table. "James." Her voice was shaking now. "What did you put in that coffee?" James's face drained of color. He sprang up, knocking over his chair. "That wasn't supposed to be your cup." That was all I needed to hear. I stepped into the doorway, my phone already recording. What wasn't supposed to be her cup, James? He froze, caught between instinct and panic. Nina turned to him, her eyes wide with fury and fear. "You said it would just make her miss the board meeting next week. You said it wouldn't be traced." I took a step forward. "The same way last month's tea wasn't supposed to send me to urgent care." Nina doubled over, her face going white. "Call an ambulance," she gasped. "Please, I can't." I dialed 911 without hesitation. "We need an ambulance at 1542 Maple Grove Drive. My sister-in-law is having a severe reaction to something in her coffee. She's conscious but shaking." As I spoke, I kept my phone's camera on them both. "Christina," Nina gasped from the floor, her hands clawing at the carpet. You knew." "Yes," I said, my voice cold. "And now I have proof." The paramedics arrived within minutes. Nina was slipping in and out of consciousness. James tried to follow the gurney out the door, but I stepped in front of him. I'll ride with her. I told the EMTs, she needs someone who cares about her well-being. The look James gave me was pure panic. At Nashville General Hospital, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I sat in the emergency room's waiting area, clutching my phone like a lifeline. Everything felt like it was happening in slow motion, and yet my mind was racing. I opened my email and sent the recording from brunch to my private folder, then again to my lawyer. Just in case. James had said he was going to park the car. That had been over 20 minutes ago. A nurse finally stepped into the room. Family, of Nina Anderson. I stood. I'm her sister-in-law. She's stable. But the doctors found some concerning elements in her blood work. The toxicology screen showed compounds that require explanation. Dr. Phillips would like to speak with you. Dr. Phillips was waiting outside Nina's room, a tall woman with silver-streaked hair and commanding eyes. She greeted me with a clipboard. Mrs. Bennett, could you tell me what happened? I think this explains it better. I pulled out my phone and played the recording. She listened, without interrupting. Her face remained unreadable if the clip ended. This is highly serious, she said, already scribbling notes. The substance we identified in Ms. Anderson's system isn't common. It's used in pharmaceutical trials, not something found in a kitchen. Behind us, footsteps echoed down the hallway. I turned on. There was James. His face was pale, his hands trembling. Christina, he said, voice cracking. Let me explain. Stay back, Dr. Phillips said sharply, pressing a nurse call button. Security, to room 412. This is all a misunderstanding? He pleaded. Nina was confused. She didn't know what she was saying. I pulled up the text screenshots I had forwarded to myself last week, messages between him and Nina. The words glared back at him, just a little more this time. She'd be too sick to present. You went through my phone, he whispered. After, I found that unlabeled bottle in your desk drawer. Yes. Security guards arrived, flanking him. Sir, we'll need you to come with us. James looked betrayed, as if I were the one who had broken our marriage. You were working too hard, he mumbled as they led him away. You were taking everything. We wanted to slow you down. By poisoning me. I turned back to Dr. Phillips. He and Nina have been doing this for months. I've been hospitalized 3 times this year. We'll run comparative tests, she said. If this matches your prior blood work, this could go far beyond just attempted sabotage. Behind the glass, I saw Nina stir in her bed, wires and monitors hooked up to her trembling body. She looked terrified, and this was only the beginning. The corridor outside Nina's hospital room was quiet, but the tension wrapped around my chest like a vice. I could hear the rhythmic beep of her heart monitor through the glass. For years, I had second-guessed my instincts, dismissing my discomfort as paranoia. But now, the truth was emerging in waves, each revelation colder than the last. Christina Bennett. A calm, authoritative voice broke through my thoughts. I turned to find a woman in a dark blazer approaching, mid-40s, sharp features, clear eyes. She held a notebook in one hand and a badge clipped to her belt. I'm Detective Marisol Mendoza, Domestic Crimes Division. Dr. Phillips briefed me. May we talk? Yes, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. We stepped into a small consultation room. She closed the door gently before taking out her pen. You mentioned repeated hospitalizations. I nodded and pulled out a second phone from my handbag. I started documenting everything months ago, I said. Symptoms, dates, conversations, patterns. Detective Mendoza leaned forward. Let's go through it. I handed her my notes, a digital document with a precise log. February 16th, dinner at Nina's, severe nausea. Muscle weakness. April 3rd, tea offered by Nina. Vomiting. Visual disturbances. ER visit. June 22nd, breakfast after an overnight at their house. Hospitalized. Today, attempted poisoning via coffee. Nina consumed it by accident. The detective reviewed each line with growing concern. And you have recordings? Yes, I said, unlocking the backup phone and playing one from last month. James. She's showing up to every meeting like she's invincible, Nina's voice hissed. This next one should do it. Just keep her from the Henderson pitch, James replied. Detective Mendoza met my eyes. You were right to record these. I stared at the table. I felt crazy for months. I started to wonder if I was imagining everything. That's how these things work, Mendoza said, softer now. They isolate you. Make you doubt yourself. But you were smart, you protected yourself. She closed her notebook and stood. We'll need formal statements. I've already requested forensic analysis of both their phones and homes. Did either of them have access to chemicals or lab substances? I hesitated. James has a friend, Ethan Corbin. He works in pharmaceutical research. They went to grad school together. Do you have contact info? I gave her what I had, an old business card James had once left in our drawer, almost forgotten. We'll reach out. In the meantime, I want you to stay with someone you trust. Is there anyone? My coworker, Mia. She's my best friend. I'll call her. Mendoza nodded. Good. And Christina, thank you. Most people don't come forward until it's too late. Mia drove me home, refusing to let me spend the night alone. This is insane, she said, her hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. James and Nina, poisoning you. I know, I whispered. I keep replaying it. All the times I brushed it off. The Christmas party food. The weird metallic taste in my tea. Even the time I fell down the stairs, James said I was dizzy from stress. But I hadn't felt dizzy until after drinking what he gave me. We pulled up to my townhome. It looked different now, less like a safe space. More like a scene of past crimes. Inside. I grabbed the second notebook I'd started, a physical one I kept hidden behind old tax files. In it, I'd taped photos, notes, even one of neat, handwritten get well soon cards that had smelled faintly like the tea she'd given me. You kept everything? Mia asked in awe. I had to. They were so good at covering their tracks. The ER couldn't find anything conclusive. Even the tests came back clean. Until now. Mia nodded solemnly. You're going to bury them in court? The investigation deepens the next morning. Detective Mendoza called. We located Ethan Corbin, she said. He confirmed that James had been asking about non-lethal testing agents, ones that mimic viral symptoms without leaving traceable residue. My stomach flipped. He just gave them to him. No, Mendoza said. He said James stole them. Ethan noticed some small clinical vials missing from a controlled testing fridge after a dinner party at his house 6 months ago, and he didn't report it. He didn't think it was related. Until now. Later that day, Mendoza's team executed a warrant at the Anderson marketing firm. James's office yielded damning fines labeled vials, a dosing log, and even printed photos of my calendar and meeting notes. They were tracking your every move, Mendoza said that evening. Even noting your cycle. Nina's handwriting is all over the logs. They timed your illness to coincide with key client pitches. And James, he lawyered up, won't speak without counsel. And Nina, she's cooperating for now, but not fully. She's still claiming James exaggerated the effects. Says she only wanted to delay your presentations. I laughed bitterly. By poisoning my coffee, I sat across from my lawyer, Nora Steele, a brilliant, no-nonsense defense attorney with a reputation for dismantling liars. You did everything right, Nora said, flipping through the evidence. We have motive, opportunity, premeditation, recordings, and now hospital-grade toxicology backing it all. She leaned forward. The DA is filing charges for attempted murder, conspiracy, and pharmaceutical theft. James and Nina will both face long sentences. I nodded slowly. But Christina, she added, her voice gentle now, you'll also need to be prepared. The defense might try to portray this as a misunderstanding, a marital dispute, even professional jealousy. I'm ready, I said, though my heart thudded with dread. I have to be win. When I returned to Alden Marketing 2 weeks later, there were whispers. But they weren't cruel, they were reverent. You're a legend, one intern whispered. In the elevator. You came back stronger. Mr. Alden, our CEO, called me into his office. You showed courage under unthinkable pressure, he said. The Henderson account was impressed by how you handled everything. They want to renew with you as executive lead. Tears prickled in my eyes. Thank you, no, he said. Thank you, Christina. You didn't just save the account, you exposed something rotten at its core. Later that night, I received an anonymous email. It had no subject line, just a link. I clicked. It was security footage from an upscale lounge. I recognized the bar. A place where James and I had celebrated our first anniversary. But the video showed James and Nina, 2 months ago, in a booth at the back. Laughing. Leaning in close, kissing, my breath caught. I played it again, slower so, that was the truth. This wasn't just sabotage, it was a love affair built on my destruction. A twisted romance wrapped in poison and betrayal. My heart broke, quietly, bitterly. But I also felt something else. Clarity. The first day of the trial arrived. Beneath a gray Tennessee sky, I sat silently at the plaintiff's table, hands folded tightly in my lap, as the courtroom slowly filled with attorneys, reporters, and spectators. The judge's bench loomed high above, solemn and oak-framed, while the seal of the state of Tennessee glinted coldly on the wall behind it. Across the room sat James. He didn't look at me. He was dressed in a charcoal suit, no tie, no wedding ring. His once confident posture now slouched in the defendant's seat. The man who had once whispered dreams of forever now looked like a shell. Haunted and hollow. Next to him sat Nina. Her eyes scanned the room with a tight, careful calculation. She wore beige, her hair tied in a low bun, no makeup except for a soft pink gloss that I once complimented during happier times. Her gaze flitted past me. Not defiant, not remorseful, just controlled. So this was the face of someone who tried to murder me. Judge Hanley entered, and the courtroom rose in unison. The trial began. The prosecution was clear and deliberate. This case, Assistant District Attorney Caroline Mercer said, is not about a simple dispute. It's about a calculated, months-long campaign of deliberate poisoning, psychological manipulation, and professional sabotage. The defendants, Mr. James Bennett and Ms. Nina Anderson, were not only conspiring together, they were romantically involved, financially motivated, and willing to risk a human life to serve their ambitions. I watched her speak, feeling both grateful and gutted. This was about me, but it also wasn't. I had become evidence exhibit A. In my own story, James's defense attorney, a slick man named Gregory Van Rose, buttoning his jacket. My client deeply regrets the events that transpired, he began, but there was never any intent to cause serious harm. Mr. Bennett's actions, while misguided, were the result of concern for his wife's mental and physical health. He believed she was pushing herself too hard. This was not malicious. This was desperation. I bit the inside of my cheek hard enough to taste blood. Nina's lawyer offered a colder defense. Ms. Anderson denies any knowledge of harmful substances. Any comments made during a medical emergency should be considered unreliable and inadmissible. She was not in control of her faculties and never intended to incriminate herself. Except I had it all on video. The courtroom watched the brunch, recording in full. James's voice, nervous and quiet, admitting the cup was meant for me. Nina's panicked confession. The phrase "you promised it wouldn't be traced" echoed off the stone walls like a gunshot. James stared at the floor. Nina looked away. The jury, 7 women, 5 men, was wrapped. Then came the text messages. Projected on a screen. Message after message showed James and Nina discussing my schedule, dosing plans, and symptoms. She'll be too sick to present. Add it to her tea this time. Make sure she misses the board review. And then the one that changed the tone of the entire courtroom. If this one works, we'll be rid of her. Once and for all. First came Dr. Phillips. She explained the substances found in Nina's blood, the ones meant for me. She detailed the pharmaceutical compounds used in animal testing and how they could cause neurological symptoms in humans at low doses. She confirmed that these substances matched the unknowns in my medical records from earlier hospital visits. The patient was being poisoned, Dr. Phillips said plainly, repeatedly, with escalating doses. Then came Ethan Corbin, the pharmaceutical researcher. He identified the missing vials from his lab. They weren't just dangerous, they were never supposed to leave the facility. The dosage logs found in James's office. He was experimenting. The word experimenting sent a ripple through the courtroom. James lowered his head in shame. Nina finally looked uncomfortable. I took a deep breath and stood, walking up to the witness stand. I raised my right hand, swore the oath, and sat down. The prosecutor approached. Mrs. Bennett, when did you first begin to suspect something was wrong? I began slowly. When I got sick. Again and again. Always after eating or drinking something they prepared. But the doctors couldn't find anything. James said it was stress. Nina said it must be something I ate earlier. But it kept happening. So I started documenting. I started recording. The prosecutor nodded. And the morning of the brunch, I saw the look in James's eyes. And the smell of the coffee, it was familiar. I didn't drink it. I switched cups. And what happened then? Nina drank it. She had a seizure. That's when James admitted it was meant for me. I turned and met his eyes for the first time. His eyes were bloodshot, watery. He looked away. The defense tried to rattle me on cross-examination. Mrs. Bennett, Gregory Vance said, you claim this was an attempt to harm you. But can you prove they intended permanent damage? Couldn't this have been a series of terrible decisions made out of concern for your health? I smiled tightly. If they were trying to help me, they wouldn't have tried to keep me from testifying. They wouldn't have kissed behind my back. And they wouldn't have tracked my ovulation, calendar, and dosage reactions like I was a lab rat. The courtroom was silent. Even the judge paused before nodding me off the stand. The video of James and Nina kissing in that bar lounge played next. I can't wait until she's out of the picture, James whispered. Just one more dose, Nina replied. My stomach twisted, but I watched. Every second. This wasn't just betrayal. It was premeditated elimination. The prosecution's voice rose. This wasn't about concern. This was a toxic blend of ambition, resentment, and romance. Christina Bennett was thriving professionally, personally, and that was the threat. They didn't want to compete with her. So they tried to erase her. The defense faltered. James's lawyer grasped at straws. There was no death, only a near miss. We ask for leniency. Nina's lawyer claimed medical delirium, but no one believed them anymore. We waited for 6 hours. The jury filed back into the room. The foreman stood, a woman with silver-streaked hair and steel in her spine. In the matter of the state versus James Bennett and Nina Anderson, guilty, on all counts, attempted murder, conspiracy, misuse of restricted substances, intent to cause bodily harm. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. James slumped forward. Weeping Nina stiffened. Her jaw clenched so tightly I thought it might snap. The judge pronounced sentence. 25 years. For James. 22 years for Nina. No possibility of parole for the first 15. I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I simply felt free. The courtroom emptied slowly. The press swarmed the steps. But I ignored them. Mia stood at the back waiting for me. You did it, she whispered. No, I said, squeezing her hand. They did this too, themselves. I just survived it. And the storm. It had passed, but what remained was something stronger than survival. A year since the courtroom, echoed with the word guilty, and the faces of my former husband and sister-in-law turned from smugness to surrender. Yet I didn't measure that year in months or milestones. I measured it in peaceful mornings, in coffee brewed with confidence, and in the absence of fear. The woman I used to be, the one who smiled politely while her life was being quietly poisoned, was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, sharper. And standing behind a podium at the Nashville Women in Leadership Summit. I was living proof of that. I looked out over the audience, hundreds of executives, entrepreneurs, and rising stars, the same city where I once nearly died from. A cup of coffee was now the place where I thrived. My keynote speech was called Surviving the Brew, Rising from Betrayal to Power. It started with a coffee cup, I said, my voice steady. But it ended with a courtroom. There was a pause. You could hear a pin drop. Not everyone who smiles at your success is rooting for it. Sometimes, the threat doesn't wear a mask. Sometimes it wears a wedding ring, or offers you tea. A quiet gasp rippled through the crowd. I let it settle before continuing. They thought they could break me. But here's what they forgot. Pressure doesn't destroy diamonds, it reveals them. After the trial, I returned to Alden Marketing not as a survivor, but as a leader. The Henderson account was renewed for another 3 years, then referred to more high-profile clients. My presentation from the hospital bed became an industry legend. Last quarter, I was promoted to Chief Strategy Officer, but more than the corner office or the bonus checks. I valued the respect earned through resilience, not charm, and yes, romance found its way back in. It started with coffee. Real coffee this time. No strange smell, no metallic aftertaste, just a small cafe on 9th Street. The barista was a friend of Mia's and introduced me to Nathan Blake, a corporate security consultant with laugh lines, espresso brown eyes, and a voice that sounded like Safe Harbor. At first, I didn't want to trust it. How could I? But Nathan never pushed. He just listened, watched, waited. He never asked me to pretend. Never minimized what I'd been through. He simply made space for me to breathe again. The nightmares stopped slowly. The sound of a coffee machine no longer triggered a tremor in my hand. I learned to reclaim old rituals, brunches, early morning runs, late-night strategy calls with joy instead of dread. MIA and I started a side initiative called Caffeine and Courage, a mentorship program for women surviving workplace betrayal and coercion. We offered coaching, legal advice, and emotional support. What began as a simple Instagram post turned into a national movement. People listened, because the story wasn't just about me. It was about every woman who'd been silenced, sidelined, or sabotaged. A few months ago, I received 2 letters. One from Nina, handwritten in shaky cursive from the state penitentiary. I don't expect forgiveness, but I do hope you know he told me it was harmless. That it would only make you miss work, not die. I believed him because I wanted to. I hated how you made me feel small. But I see now, that was my failure. I lost everything because I tried to take it from you. I'm sorry. The second letter was from James. Typed. Cold. Precise. I accept the sentence, but I reject the idea that I ever wanted to kill you. You were impossible to keep up with, Christina. I just wanted space to breathe. I made terrible choices, but I hope someday you'll understand what pushed me to them. I folded both letters and locked them in a drawer. Not because I forgave them, but because their story was no longer mine to carry. Tonight, at Henderson Global's annual gala, I stood in front of the city's most powerful executives. The theme, Resilience Brews Results. A tall, steel French press sat on every table. Inside each was a card with a quote I'd personally chosen. Mine read, "The same water that softens the potato hardens the egg. It's not about the storm. It's about what you're made of." When I was called to speak, I lifted my cup. For every woman who's ever questioned her instincts, for every professional who's had her wings clipped by envy, for everyone who's been told to sit down when she was born to lead, this toast is for you. And for a moment, I imagined Nina watching from her cell. James is reading about the event in a magazine. And I hoped they understood. I didn't just survive them. I transcended them. Final note. From victim to victor, my story isn't about poison anymore. It's about healing, power, and clarity. They tried to ruin my life. Instead, they gave me a reason to reclaim it, cup by cup, meeting by meeting, brick by brick. They brewed bitterness, but I brewed legacy.